My name is Liam. I'm 32. Every day I went to the warehouse in the Strip District, where I spent hours stacking boxes. After work, I'd go back to my modest apartment in Hazelwood, which was just mine. On weekends, my ritual was to order pizza from Tony's Pizzeria and binge-watch classic 80s horror/sci-fi movies. I even liked that piece, knowing what would happen every day. But inside, things were heavy. Bills piled up more than the boxes at work. The overdue rent was already a huge snowball, and the bank called every day. My sister Chloe, unemployed, depended on me for everything. I couldn't sleep right, my head spinning with numbers and the shame of not being able to cope. I started thinking about things I never imagined, wrong things, just to catch a breath. The desperation was suffocating me, leading me to some really bad thoughts. My head was buzzing, and it was one night at the Rusty Mug Bar with Ethan and Marcus that the conversation turned to stealing. They talked about an old cemetery, Old Willow Creek, full of bronze plaques and statues, valuable stuff on the graves. At first, I thought it was absurd, a bad joke, but the idea stuck. We drank, and the lack of money, what tomorrow would bring, just pushed us. Desperation made us see it as a way out, no matter how wrong it was. It wasn't just a rumor anymore. It was a dirty plan taking shape. The thought of stealing plaques and statues from graves turned my stomach. I wasn't like that. I didn't want to mess with the dead. Sleepless nights, my head spinning, trying to find another way out, anything. But the bills, Chloe, the shame, all of it pulled me down. I felt stuck, no way out, like I was drowning in my own life. I kept telling myself, it's just bronze, nobody will miss it. But I already felt like something bad was gonna happen, even before we started. That afternoon, after work, I made some instant ramen. The TV was on, some random show playing, but I wasn't paying attention. I called Chloe, just to check if she was okay. She talked about the job interview. I tried to sound normal, to encourage her. Her voice gave me a tiny bit of peace. I hung up, stomach tight. I went to bed early, but sleep wouldn't come. Night came, and it felt heavier than usual. We walked, our sneakers dragging on the asphalt, and the silence was weird, not a normal street silence. Ethan tried to crack jokes. Marcus talked about how he'd spend the money from the plaques, but their voices shook. Every step I took was a weight, a struggle. I felt the guilt squeezing me, but the idea of stealing, of fixing the bills, pulled me forward. The rusted gate of Old Willow Creek Cemetery appeared in the darkness, and it felt like it was waiting for us. I just wanted to disappear from there, but I couldn't stop. The gate groaned bad when we pushed it. The noise faded fast. The cemetery silence was so big it swallowed everything. It was a heavy silence, different from the street, like it wouldn't let any sound exist. Ethan's and Marcus's weak flashlights barely lit anything, showing old headstones and twisted trees. I felt a chill on my neck, a clear feeling that someone was watching us. I tried to ignore it, but my heart was beating so hard it felt like it would jump out of my chest. Ethan and Marcus didn't care, just whispered about the bronze's value they'd steal, pointing to the tombs with the most ornaments. Every step I took felt wrong, my stomach churning with guilt and fear. We stopped in front of an old grave with a well-worked bronze plaque that really stood out. Suddenly, with a dry snap that made me jump, the bronze plaque gave way and came loose. Ethan almost fell backward, holding the heavy ornament, and Marcus shined his flashlight into the hole that was left. It wasn't just a hole in the stone. It was a dark, deep void. Endless. A place no one should mess with. A smell of wet dirt and something rotten rose up, turning my stomach, and I started to get scared of what we had done. And that's when it happened. A scream. Not a human scream, but a strange sound that seemed to come from inside that grave. A sound that shouldn't exist, that froze me in place. My friends, Ethan and Marcus, dropped the plaque on the ground and ran off in a panic. I just stood there, paralyzed, just staring at the black hole. I just stood there, paralyzed, just staring at the black hole. The scream didn't stop. It wasn't human, not an animal, I swear. It was a really strange sound, like a grunt, that seemed to come from the earth itself, and I felt it vibrate in my ribs, in my bones. A sound of ancient suffering, full of a rage that wasn't normal, that made the air go cold, and my heart. That sound echoed, distorted, like the whole cemetery was screaming with it. A horrible warning no one could imagine, that shattered all the silence. Ethan's and Marcus's flashlights shook so much in their hands, the light swinging crazy on their pale faces. They had already dropped the plaque on the ground, but the scream seemed to hold us there, unable to move. I didn't know what we had woken up, what would come next, and it suffocated me, left me without air. It was a panic that came from inside. My mind screamed to run, but my body wouldn't obey. It was like an invisible hand held me there, paralyzed, alone, staring into the grave's black hole. The fear of what was coming was worse than the scream. Then the pressure came. Strong, cold, around my ankles, like something grabbed me from underground. The earth around me started to tremble, to give way. I felt mud and dirt climbing my legs, swallowing me. A smell of mold and rot hit my nose, making me sick. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out, stuck in my throat. My eyes were wide, fixed on the grave's hole, which seemed to release cold air. The earth opened wider, and the feeling of being pulled down became unbearable, dragging me into the darkness. I felt a fear I couldn't handle, something very real. The earth swallowed me. I felt thick, damp roots scratching my legs, like something was pulling me with an unbeatable force. The smell of rot and wet earth. I tried to grab anything on the surface. My nails just scraped the mud, but there was nothing firm. Every move was worse. The earth gave way more, dragging me into a dark, moldy hole. The pressure in my chest increased, the air vanished, and a horrible panic took me completely. It wasn't just earth, it was something alive, wanting to devour me. The scream I wanted to let out became a muffled moan as darkness climbed my body. My muscles burned from resisting so hard, what it was like fighting something very strong I couldn't see. With every inch, the despair grew, and I was sure I was being pulled and swallowed by something ancient and evil. The earth seemed alive, and I was just They looked like deformed people with long arms and legs, and it gave me a chill, something not of this world. There were a lot of them, all together, like they were part of the earth itself. Their outlines flickered. For an instant, I saw eyes. Eyes without light, empty, but full of an ancient hunger, staring right through me. Without a sound, a cold, ancient whisper got into my head, and I felt their anger for me messing with their place. I tried to think it was just fear and not enough air, but those shadows stuck in my head, and I knew it wasn't my imagination. It was the buried, right there, pulling me into their world, where death seemed to have a life of its own. I could barely breathe. The vision just got worse. Their anger seeped into me, choking me. The hunger in their eyes showed me it wasn't an accident. They were waiting. The earth wasn't just swallowing me. It felt like it was handing me over to the buried. I was an intruder. They were the owners of everything down there. A fear I'd never felt froze me. A cold that came from deep inside, not from the outside. I knew I was being dragged into something I couldn't understand. A place that wasn't meant for living people. Not knowing what the buried were or what they wanted was the worst part. The fear was squeezing me tight. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out, stuck in my throat. It was like someone had ripped it right out of me. Only a silent, desperate scream echoed in my head, a panic that had no end. My lungs burned, begging for air, but I couldn't even breathe properly. The weight of the earth on me and the shock of seeing the buried just froze me up. Every muscle in my body trembled nonstop, unable to do anything. My hands, stuck in the mud, tried to move, but it was useless. I was a puppet, without control, in the hands of something I didn't even understand. A strange cold, coming from inside, crept up my spine. It wasn't the cold of the night. It was the cold of knowing I was screwed. The fear was so big it squeezed me, suffocating me there, between life and death. The cemetery just seemed to watch, in silence, while I went through that horror. The dirt just kept coming up. The mud, cold and sticky, clung to my chest, then my shoulders, and moved up to my neck. Every bit of dirt was new weight, another layer pinning me down, like they were building my own tomb right then. Up above, the world was just disappearing. The faint moonlight, which had seemed like a tiny bit of hope before, was just a speck now, almost gone. The smell of rot and wet earth was too strong, choking me. I felt the rough earth on my skin, the cold getting into my bones. My head was the only thing free, but I felt it being pulled down too, slowly. My jaw was clenched, eyes wide open, trying to see the dark sky before everything was gone for good. Breathing became almost impossible. Just shallow gasps. It wasn't just the weight of the dirt. It was the panic crushing my lungs. I knew there was no escaping, no fighting back. I was being buried alive, and with every second, I felt like I was becoming part of that cursed ground. Not knowing what would happen after I vanished completely was as bad as the burial itself. It took over everything, not just my body, but my mind. The guilt ate at me inside, more than any physical pain. My sick sister's face, the bills that just kept coming. I was a desperate idiot, thinking robbing graves would fix things. Now, the dirt pressed in on me, the voice in my head calling me a thief, a coward. I deserved it. The panic of being buried alive mixed with shame and regret. It wasn't just my body being taken over. It was my soul. I messed with a sacred place, and the punishment was fair, but so cruel. Greed threw me into this hell, and I couldn't escape the idea that I had dug my own grave. The dirt squeezed everything. There was no light anymore, just the foul smell and the taste of mud in my mouth. My ears rang, and I felt the pressure on every part of my body. It was like the world had turned into a tight grave, and I was the dead one. The panic was so big, I thought I'd explode from the inside. It was like everything had been taken over completely. I was there, alone, in the dark, not knowing if I'd breathe again. Not knowing what was going to happen was torture. The pressure stopped. Trapped, the earth no longer rose. Head out, mouth and nose free, I pulled crazy air. Eyes open, I saw the strange old Willow Creek Cemetery, the giant grass, buried neck deep, unmoving. I seemed a flesh statue among the gravestones. Earth's cold rose, but the shock was worse. I didn't die, but was alive and trapped, part of that cursed place. I tried to move arms and legs. Useless. Throat dry, my first hoarse words. They pulled me. I repeated this non-stop, not even knowing what I was saying. Not knowing who they were or what I'd endured would haunt me forever. I knew it was the worst thing that happened, but not Hell's End. Panic of immobility was new torture, different from being swallowed. I was an easy target, exposed, waiting. The cemetery's silence weighed. Each shadow seemed to hide something. Ethan and Marcus ran aimless. The strange cry from the grave still echoed in their heads. The image of Liam, paralyzed, pulled into the earth, stayed in their minds. The panic of having fled was great, but the guilt of abandoning their friend was a worse weight. "We can't just leave," Ethan said, his voice hoarse, trembling. Marcus was white, but nodded, not knowing what they'd find or what they would do, haunted every thought. The guilt of being a coward was unbearable, wouldn't leave their heads. They had to return, even scared to face what was there. I couldn't move a muscle, only feel the cold earth squeezing me. The cry from the grave still echoed in my head, but now silence killed me. Each shadow turned into a monster, and the fear of being pulled again wouldn't leave me. The darkness wasn't just lack of light. It seemed to watch me, heavy. The earth's cold mixed with fear, entering my bones. I could only murmur. They pulled me, like a madman, trying not to freak out. My head hurt, and not knowing what would come was worse than death. I was there, an easy target, feeling panic take over every inch of my body. Ethan's flashlight cut the old Willow Creek Cemetery darkness, and we saw Liam, just his head out, buried neck deep in cold earth, looking like a broken, lifeless doll. A quick relief finding him, but panic came again. "Are they still here?" Marcus whispered, voice fading with fear. We didn't know what to do. Get close to help or run again. Scared of being pulled too. Not knowing what to do was a punch to the stomach. It drained our courage. We started digging, our nails in the cold, hard dirt. Every handful of grime felt like it weighed a ton. Ethan used a piece of wood he found. I just used my hands, desperate. The fear that the buried would come back, that they'd pull us down too, wouldn't leave my head. Liam just babbled, his eyes wide and vacant. They're gonna pull. Don't let them. His voice was a whisper that broke the silence, making us even more scared. Exhaustion was hitting hard. My arms ached, but we couldn't stop. The feeling of being watched was heavy, like shadows were right there, waiting for us to fail. Finally, we managed to get Liam out of the ground. He collapsed, his legs wobbly, completely drained. His skin was all scraped, dirty, and his eyes? My God, his eyes were wide, fixed, darting all over the old Willow Creek Cemetery, as if he was still seeing the buried. He didn't make any sense, just murmured, "They pulled again." You could see how much he'd suffered. It felt like it had gotten into his soul. Shock hit him hard. He was weak, disoriented, but at least he was free from the grave. At UPMC Mercy, the silence was heavy, different from the cemetery. Doctors and nurses looked at me with pity, completely clueless. I wouldn't let anyone touch me. I still felt the dirt clinging to my skin, something that wouldn't come off. My eyes scanned the room, searching for the shadows, the buried that had pulled me down. I repeated softly, almost a hoarse whisper. They pulled me down. Nobody believed me. They thought I was delirious, that it was just what I'd been through. Loneliness squeezed me tight. Not knowing what I lived through separated me from everyone. Going back to my modest apartment in Hazelwood was torture. The smell of wet earth haunted me. Wouldn't let go. I can't step on grass anymore. Can't even look at a potted plant. I close the windows, afraid the night's darkness will call me back, that they'll pull me. The nights of Tony's Pizzeria and 80s horror movies were gone. Now it's just me, sitting in the dark, listening to my own heart. The fear of the earth became my prison. What I lived through haunts me, and not knowing what happened buries me alive every single day. Ethan and Marcus showed up once. Pale, silent. Guilt was written all over their faces. But their fear of what I'd become, of what I talked about, was greater. They couldn't look me in the eye. They'd shrink back when I murmured about the buried who pulled me. They seemed like ghosts, not my friends. That day, I realized I was alone. Chloe tried, but she didn't understand anything, and that created a huge barrier. She didn't see the dirt, didn't feel what had happened, the suffering. I pushed everyone away, became alone. No one would ever understand what I saw, what haunts me constantly. Solitude became my private hell. My apartment walls became my own private cemetery. I'd see shadows moving in the corners, even with the lights on. It wasn't in my head, I swear. It was real. Those twisted shapes, the empty eyes, watching me. Any noise at night, a creak in the wood, the wind against the window, became proof the buried were there, pulling me back in. But now, they were pulling me into my own head. It wasn't just the dirt owning me anymore. It was my mind. I felt their presence, that same cold I felt when they dragged me into the grave. It wasn't just the memory of being buried. It was knowing the buried were with me, haunting me awake, getting into my dreams. It's endless torture, something that won't let go. That night at Old Willow Creek changed me in a way I can't undo. My old life, it feels like it belonged to someone else. A memory I can't quite reach. My head just won't stop with the questions. What were the buried? What did they want from me? And the worst one, are they still out there? Or did some part of them come back with me? Something that never ends. What I went through isn't a wound that will heal. It's a dark mark, like a tattoo on my soul. Something that feeds on my fear and on not knowing what happened. It's permanent. My name is Alex. I'm 28. I live alone in a small apartment in River North. My routine was pretty set. I'd wake up early, make a strong, dark roast coffee, read the news on my tablet before work. I'm a graphic designer at an ad agency. My days are filled with deadlines and meetings. At night, after a simple dinner, I'd usually watch a movie or read a book, looking for some peace before sleep. After the incident, my eyes and ears just aren't the same, you know? Any sound now, wind, knocking against the window, or the building creaking, it instantly puts me on edge. I stop, take a deep breath, and just wait. Always waiting for something. I don't know what it is, but I feel like it's close by. I feel so guilty, and this heavy loneliness just crushes me. Not knowing what took Mark, that's the worst part. I don't know what I saw, what I didn't see. I just know the fear is still here, a trauma that won't let go, you know? Ethan and Caleb vanished from my life. They couldn't handle it. We'd meet, but the silence was thick, full of unspoken things. They looked at me differently, like a living reminder of that night, of the invasion, of what happened to Mark. I try to talk, but the words won't come. Guilt just squeezes my throat. The loneliness is a huge weight, and the image of his burned hands, the fear in his face, that won't leave me. I feel alone, carrying all of this. It's hell. I stare out the window, praying for clear skies, but they come. And with the rain, the phone rings. It chills me to the bone. I can't ignore it. I answer, and the static swallows me, you know? But I know it's there, waiting. Mark's voice. Always. Cut up, like it's from a hole, far away. Alex. It's torture. I hang up, but the sound stays. The guilt, the fear of what happened, it all mixes. I feel trapped, reliving that night, not knowing what took him. Loneliness crushes me. I try to hold on to logic, you know? Tell myself it's just my head, trauma, stress. I turn off my phone, shove it in a drawer, airplane mode. But then it rains, and uncertainty comes back and squeezes me. Why always the rain? Why his voice? No one would believe me. I'm alone in this, fearing it's not just my mind. Is it real? I'm losing it. Guilt chokes me. Loneliness is a bottomless pit. I look in the mirror, barely recognize myself. The old Alex, who laughed easily and went along with that crazy idea, is gone. Now, I see an exhausted guy with sleepless eyes. The trauma latched onto me, you know, gotten under my skin. Nothing's normal. Just the doubt of what took Mark and what connects me to the rain. It's hell. In the living room, my book, it lost its appeal. Silence brought no calm. A low, constant hum, barely heard, felt in my head more than air. Not building, fridge, neighbor. Annoying. Seemed from within or everywhere. I felt like Mark's connection was always active, an open channel. I tried to ignore, rationalize it as tiredness. But that connected, pulsing feeling only grew. A sound everywhere. Constant reminder I wasn't alone. Uncertainty stole my peace painfully. That hum, already irritating, came before the visions. Reading or screen gazing was impossible. Wall shadows moved strangely, unnaturally. Reflections warped on shiny surfaces, always peripheral. Quick blurs, odd shapes shifted, vanishing before I saw them clearly. I'd turn, finding only emptiness. It angered me. I thought I was going crazy. But the observed feeling intensified. A pressure I sensed, not saw. Something felt there, at my vision's edge, playing games. Were my eyes betraying me? Or was it the invasion again? The thing that took Mark appearing. That night's trauma. His raw hands, desperate eyes. Next, objects began shifting. Not mess, but deliberate. Barely noticeable. The remote, from coffee table to bookshelf. A kitchen book, now in the living room, randomly open. I tried convincing myself of forgetfulness, but frequency and specific items. A wooden coaster, always in its spot, now on the kitchen counter, chilled me. Nothing stolen, just small shifts, making me paranoid. Uncertainty poisoned me. Someone entered, moved my things, not to steal, but show access. My house wasn't mine. It was the invasion, now inside my apartment. Trauma returned. Loneliness of telling no one choked my chest. The fear of losing my mind felt real. To make things worse, I started feeling touches. In the heavy dark of my room, trying to sleep, a cold, quick touch on the back of my neck or my arm. It wasn't just regular goosebumps, but a brush of cold fingers that didn't feel real. I'd jump in bed, my heart pounding. I'd look around, eyes wide. Just the heavy dark. Was it just my own fear? The feeling was too real. A coldness that didn't come from the air, but from something external invading me. Like the thing that took Mark was right there, testing me, reminding me it was present. The uncertainty was slowly killing me. Each touch felt like a sting. It was the invasion all over again. The loneliness squeezed me, turning my room into a cell. The trauma came back full force, and the fear of losing my mind froze me. But the worst part, what really broke me, was the smell. Out of nowhere, in the living room, trying to get back to normal, that smell. Wet earth, damp and heavy, with a burnt undertone, a sickly, sweet and nauseating stench that seemed to get into everything, even me. It wasn't raining, nothing was burning. It would just appear, too strong for a few seconds, filling the air, then vanish, suddenly, leaving me nauseous. Every time it showed up, it was a punch to the gut. I kept replaying everything in my mind. The cemetery, the night it all happened, Mark's raw hands, the disturbed earth, that smell of death and something spoiled. It was a living trauma. My apartment, which was supposed to be my safe place, turned into a private hell. The smell haunted me, like it was the mark of that thing, showing it was still there. The uncertainty made me crazy, and the fear of not escaping, of being next, completely froze me. The loneliness of carrying this by myself crushed me. The voice, it wasn't just on the phone anymore, not just with the rain. It started appearing in the air, a low whisper, almost too faint to hear, calling my name. Alex. It was Mark's voice, one I knew, but it was distorted, like it was coming from very, very far away, or from inside my own head. And along with it, the smell, that stench of wet earth and burning, which used to come and go. Now it stayed. It clung to the apartment, to my clothes, to my skin. I tried opening the windows, but it didn't help. It was like the smell was coming from inside me, or from the air itself. The loneliness suffocated me. I walked around the place, trying to find the source, but there wasn't one. The voice and the smell were everywhere, invading everything I felt. I felt trapped, surrounded by the living memory of that night, of what happened. The fear was real, the uncertainty of what it was, and if I would be next, ate me alive. I couldn't breathe right anymore. It was hell. It was hell. Not just in my head. It started in my body. First, a weird burning in my palms. Exactly like what happened to Mark. No wound, but it felt like I'd held onto something glowing hot. Then, the scratches. Small, thin, like invisible claws had pulled at me in the night. I'd wake up with them. No memory, just the pain burning on my skin. The fear became physical, you know? Every muscle tense, waiting for the next hit that never came. But I always felt coming. Exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. Closed my eyes, saw Mark's face, frozen in fear, and felt the smell of burning even stronger. It was like the invasion wasn't just of the apartment, but of me. My body became a map of trauma nobody else saw. I felt eaten from the inside, a silent violence no one else saw, but it broke me down daily. The uncertainty of what it was ate at me, and the guilt weighed like lead, burning inside. I started avoiding mirrors, couldn't look at myself anymore. When I saw my reflection, it wasn't me, just a stranger, sunken eyes, pale skin, pure panic. But the worst part? Seeing Mark. His face, frozen in fear, appeared over mine, like a ghost stuck to my image. I saw his burned hands, then mine, with those invisible burning marks. Torture. I tried to look away, but the mirror pulled me in, forcing me to face the guilt. My mind was coming undone. I talked to myself, answered questions no one asked. Solitude was a glass wall. I'd hit it, but nobody heard. I didn't know what was real anymore. The invasion wasn't just my body, but my mind. I felt like I was losing control, like every piece of me was coming loose. The fear was constant. The uncertainty of who I was, or what I was turning into, ate me alive. The trauma became a broken mirror, showing 1,000 pieces of a nightmare. I couldn't stand being there anymore. The apartment, which was supposed to be my refuge, turned into a cage. Every corner seemed to watch me. Mark's voice, once a whisper, now echoed through the walls, calling my name. Louder, clearer. The smell of burned and damp earth was so strong it made me sick. I tried to leave, to open the door, but an unseen force pulled me back. It was like the walls were closing in, crushing me. I ran to the window, but outside, the rain was falling nonstop, and I knew the voice would be there, on the phone, waiting for me. There was nowhere to go. The loneliness was a physical weight, trapping me. I felt surrounded, cornered. My hands were burning again, and scratches appeared, even without me touching anything. It was the complete invasion, not just of my mind, but of my space, my life. The fear of being next, of ending up like Mark, was real. I felt it. The uncertainty of what was holding me there, of what this thing was driving me crazy. I was trapped, and there was no escape. It was my own personal hell, and I was the only victim. I was trapped. No way out. It was my own personal hell, and I was the only victim. Then I saw it. It wasn't a person or an animal. A dark smudge in the corner of the room, where nothing should have been. A formless shadow, moving. The air there got heavier, denser. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My eyes wouldn't look away, like the thing held me. And then came the sound. It wasn't Mark's whisper, but a scream. Sharp, distorted. It seemed to come from inside my head, and at the same time, from all corners of the apartment. It was the scream of someone burning, a sound of pure terror, the same agony I imagined Mark felt. My hands started to burn again, stronger than ever, and I smelled a horrible, burnt flesh smell. The shadow seemed to grow, stretch out, coming toward me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. It was the purest fear, and not knowing what it was froze me. I knew it was him, or what was left of him. The invasion was complete. The shadow stretched, coming at me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Pure fear, not knowing what it was, froze me. I knew it was him, or what remained. The invasion was complete. Then a cold pressure, like an invisible claw, squeezed my wrist. I saw nothing, but the pain was real, piercing my skin, like my bones were being crushed. You know? The scream in my head became a whisper, but not Mark asking for help. It was a hoarse, deep voice, seemingly from a place that doesn't exist, from a hole, whispering, "You're next." The sound ripped through my head. My hands burned, palms on fire. I smelled burnt flesh even stronger. A loneliness swallowed me. I was there, alone with that thing holding me, pulling me into the dark. The trauma from that night, the guilt, everything exploded. I was living what Mark lived. Not knowing what came next gave me terrible fear. My body was dragged, powerless, directly into the shadow that swallowed me. It was the end. The claw pulled me to the shadow, the hoarse voice whispering. Then, a flash, a white light, so strong it burned my eyes, blinding me instantly. I screamed in pure pain. The smell of burning was still there, but not knowing what that light was made me panic. Blind, on the floor, loneliness swallowed me. What was that? What saved me, or just bought me time? I lay there, sprawled, breathing heavy, heart beating fast. That cold from the shadow disappeared suddenly. No warning. I didn't feel the claw anymore. Just the cold floor, the smell of smoke. My eyes burned, but not knowing panicked me more. Why did it stop? Why let me go? The fear didn't leave. It just changed. Now it was a terrifying emptiness, a loneliness that hurt more than the burn. What happened? It took a while to move. I tried to open my eyes, but it felt like hot sand in them. The smell of smoke was still strong, stuck to me, you know? I was trembling, not from cold, but from an inner shock, a fear that wouldn't leave. What was that? What happened? I just wanted it all to stop. My head was spinning, and all I felt was loneliness and the certainty that something very wrong had just happened again. Then suddenly, everything went quiet. A heavy silence, you know? The rain stopped. My own breathing seemed silent. It was like the world had stopped. I could only hear my heart pounding in my chest and the humming in my ears. This silence was worse than any scream. It suffocated me, leaving me alone with the fear and not knowing what had disappeared into the darkness. That heavy silence totally broke me. I couldn't just stand there. I had to get out, right then. I got up kind of automatically, stumbling, arms stretched out in front of me, trying to feel for something to guide me. I couldn't see anything, just the darkness that still seemed to cling to me. Every step was a risk. I could fall at any second. The panic pushed me, a raw force telling me to run, to get away from whatever had been there, you know? Not knowing what had vanished, and the loneliness made me want to scream, but nothing came out. Just pure desperation. I was dragging myself along, still blind, when I heard it. A loud, dry knock, coming from somewhere. It sounded like the door, but I didn't even know where the door was. My heart jumped, a shock that made me stop dead in my tracks, leaving me even more alone in the dark, man. Who was it? What did they want? The fear of being found, or of who might be on the other side, was almost as bad as what I just felt, I swear. Not knowing what it was ate at me. I just wished it was a dream, that I could wake up and all of this had just been a nightmare. The knocking at the door pulled me. I dragged myself, still blind, arms out front, fumbling in the dark. Every step was an effort. I reached the door, opened it without really being able to see who it was. Standing there was the silhouette of my neighbor, Mr. Henderson. He looked at me. My eyes must have looked awful. My hands burning, the scratches visible, and that smell of smoke clinging to me, you know? He didn't understand any of it, just looked at me with pity and confusion. I tried to speak, but only a grunt came out, a senseless sound. The loneliness swallowed me whole then. Nobody would believe me. They'd just see a madman. It was the final invasion, the one in my own head. I ended up at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. I don't know how I got there. I just remember flashes. The doctors looked at me strangely, tending to my eyes that burned like fire and my raw hands with marks that looked like claws. They ran tests, asked a bunch of questions, but they didn't find anything. Nothing to explain the burns, the scratches, the temporary blindness, extreme shock, they said. Severe post-traumatic stress, hallucinations. Their words hit me like a punch. Crazy, that's what they were saying. That everything I saw, everything I felt, wasn't real. That I'd made it up. The distrust grew, not just in them, but in myself. Was I really losing it? Not knowing what it was became a cell in my head. The loneliness weighed too much, a secret no one could understand. I'd been invaded in a way science couldn't reach, and now I was stuck there, alone with what happened and the fear. They threw me back into my apartment. There was nowhere to go. The place that should have been my haven, it just turned into hell. Every shadow, every tiny creak of the floorboards, every reflection in the window, everything seemed to have the face of that thing. The smell of wet earth and burnt, even faint, was stuck to the walls, on my skin. The silence was like a scream, but I knew I wasn't alone. The incident had left invisible marks on everything, turning my home into a cage. The guilt just tightened. I saw Mark's raw hands, again and again. Not knowing what would come at night was killing me. And the loneliness? Oh man, that loneliness was an echo, filling every piece of this emptiness. Years passed after that. So many years. But my head doesn't shut off. The question is always the same. What was that shadow? What took Mark? What caused that flash that saved me? Nobody knows. And that lack of answers, man, it eats me inside. It's the worst scar. I live alone, locked up, without knowing what it is, and it eats me. The fear that that thing might return, that the incident isn't over, is real. Every rain that hits the window makes me tremble. The smell of wet earth just takes me back there. And sometimes, when it rains, the phone rings, and I swear I hear his voice. Mark's just a faint whisper. What happened became a part of me, a shadow that won't leave me. The true horror isn't dying. It's not being able to live in peace.